What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Turn the Jets podcast. I'm your host, Will Parkinson, at WillPaul11 on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, joined by Paul Kilgallen. Paul, we've been waiting a while. Aaron Glenn is officially the head coach of the New York Jets. He'll be introduced likely on Friday. The deal was seemingly done yesterday. GM, we'll get into at the end there, but Aaron Glenn's a Jet. 1994, full circle moment here, right as we start kickoff 2025, 31 years later. When he became a Jet, he wore number 31 for the Jets. He's the first player to play more than like one snap for the Jets and become a head coach of the football team in 50 plus years. You are a little older than me. You got to witness his entire, Jets career. I obviously was born when he was drafted. So first couple of years were a little blurry there for me. How you feeling? How we doing? How we feeling? The wise words of Joe Caporoso. I'm pretty excited, man.
I'm pumped. I like the numerology, divinology element you hit there with the numbers, and you buried the lead a little on the GM stuff, but I think the 1-2 punch of news was super positive for the discourse that's been happening around Glenn and the worry that's been happening around the GM hire. So I think, getting those two pieces of news back to back is super, super positive. And at least for the next couple hours until we get more news on GM, this is going to be a really happy, fun kind of celebration time here. My brother texted me about 30 seconds after the Schefter tweet broke and all it said was, "We're winning the fucking bowl." So I love Jets fans because there's a part of me that feels that way too. This is a fun, exciting hire, especially for people that remember Aaron Glenn. I wore 31 in junior football, not every year, but definitely 1 or 2 years. Because of Aaron Glenn, he was one of my favorite Jets when I was a kid. And I think that there's a lot to be said for the feeling of bringing your own guy home. The Patriots just did it with Vrabel. It's not something that happens super often. It's going on in Houston right now with DeMeco Ryans. And I think there's a really special feeling and a bond that gets created with fans when you have a player that played during a time that everybody remembers fondly and then wants to come back and help years later as well. The connection to Parcells is an exciting thing, even if and we know Parcells isn't going to be in the building in any official capacity, but we do know that they talk. So Parcells is tangentially kind of involved with the Jets again. And so I think you put all those things together in a nice, neat little package. And it's what we've been asking for. It's a return back to better times for the Jets, hopefully. And the only really remaining question is can the guy coach? Can he be a head coach? Right. And I think we're all happy to take that leap and throw a dart rather than going down a failed head coach road. As much as they said they wanted experience in this hiring cycle, I think everybody's very happy to kind of leap here with Aaron Glenn and say, you don't really know if the guy can fly until you all jump off the cliff together. So let's go.
Yeah, I want to hit on a bunch of stuff. Obviously, I'm just going to walk you through things, I guess, that you kind of hear. You keep stuff with a notebook and stuff like that. I'll share sometimes with you guys, but Glenn was apparently a heavily, look, this is a CEO hire, and I think everyone kind of wanted Robert Saleh to be that, but there was no real evidence looking back, there was no real evidence he was going to be that. He'd never done it at any level. He'd only ever been a coach. He'd kind of only really ever worked on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, he was a tight end in college, but never really worked on anything but the defensive side of the ball. He was on a staff that is one of the most micromanaged staffs in the league with Kyle Shanahan, and I think we assumed a lot. I think I fully I was excited about the Saleh hire. The biggest thing for me, Devin McCourty said this yesterday in a podcast. Rich Cimini has said this on my podcast maybe 10 days ago. Glenn is not the guy who tells you what you want to hear. He tells you what you need to hear. Saleh told people what they wanted to hear. I want to be your buddy. I don't want to be confrontational. I'm not confrontational with the media. I'm buddy-buddy with everybody in the media. No, this is a dude who's disciple of Bill Parcells, who will tell you to go fuck yourself, probably to this day. He still's got guys kissing the ring, for him down in Florida, including Aaron Glenn. But, and Sean Payton, who is not afraid of confrontation, as Jets fans know, and Dan Campbell, who's not afraid of confrontation. That's his. He comes from a tree of 3 successful head coaches that run a pretty damn tight ship, and did. Glenn is obviously a former player, has coached at every level of quality control, position coach, assistant position coach, assistant D coordinator, has been a coordinator for a lengthy amount of time now. So has done all of that, and I've talked a lot about the scouting background to me matters. This is going to be his ball game, and I know you're going to want to hit on that, so I'll leave that a little bit at B. But this is he's coming in the Mangini, Parcells, Sean Payton like level where again, I'm not saying he's going to be those guys. I'm not. Like I hope he is, but the type of control Pete Carroll, Connor used the reference for before, that type of like this whole organization is going to be. We looked for the reason Mike Vrabel was such an interesting candidate, and I think what you hope is with Glenn, the entire organization is going to represent who Aaron Glenn is. That's the whole plan going forward. It's going to be like this is the Aaron Glenn show. He's going Mike Tomlin, Pete Carroll, Jim and John Harbaugh. Like the head coach. That's who the organization's modeled after. Not this collaborative. Yeah, it's collaborative and the whole thing. This is Aaron Glenn's organization. He's the hire, obviously. Some things that I think are positive. I mentioned obviously the journey through coaching. Not afraid to rip you. And again, people will be, ooh, the penalty yards to the Lions, because they play with a level of aggression on defense that rivals a lot of the earlier 2000s football, because the entire staff was built up of guys that played in the 2000s and the 90s. And like, that's who they are. And I wonder, we'll see kind of how the staff gets built. We've heard Steve Wilkes' name. We've heard Nick Caley and Clint Kubiak and some other names. And we'll get into that right before, here in a minute. But the one other thing is the analytical piece to me is important. He's not going to be calling plays. I think that's huge. I think for Glenn to really be a CEO type, I don't know that him calling plays year one. Maybe he down the line when he's an established coach, he could take that back over, and we've seen that. I'm fine with that. That is totally cool. But for right now, media, he's going to be doing media 3-4 times a week. Going to be doing game planning. He's going to be meeting with ownership, doing a lot of things. Like I think Glenn knows how to handle himself in a meeting with any player of any level, of any age, but he also knows how to handle himself in a meeting with his bosses and be able to get his way, but not be combative. Rex Ryan talked about it. Mike Tannenbaum talked about with Woody specifically. There is a way to get what you want without ruffling feathers. And he came in with Mike T, and Mike T was in the front office. He probably learned from that. He was a scout under Rex. I'm sure he took things from that and the way they ran things. So, Paul, I guess, you talked a lot about the interesting piece of kind of giving Glenn the keys here. What do you make of this? And obviously the Jets have not hired a GM yet. They're going to be interviewing more candidates, as we speak.
Yeah, I think the you look at the way it all shook out and the way it went down, where GMs were the first one to be given second interviews, and then all of a sudden it became like it's Glenn and Newmark, right? They were in the building together on Tuesday. Then we didn't get any news, and then right after we get the Glenn news, it drips out that like they're not done with GM, and so Glenn did have his guy, but we're gonna talk to some other guys, right? And so to me, what that signals is that, like you were just getting at, this is an Aaron Glenn organization. He is the top figurehead. This is not a GM and head coach working together thing. Like you said, collaborative is good, but it's nice to have one voice at the end of the day that is going to kind of be the final word and be the final say, and everybody's going to take on that personality and responsibility. And so I think we haven't seen that with the Jets since Mangini, and that was going. I said this in our group text. I said we haven't seen it since Parcells, and then Connor reminded me that we did kind of have that structure with Mangini, and that was going pretty well until the owner forced Brett Favre on the organization and kind of derailed things and ended up getting everybody fired. And Chad won Comeback Player of the Year and won the division for the Dolphins, and so it's a structure that we haven't seen here in New York in 15 to 17 years. It's a structure that we do see some other places. And I don't want to say that it makes the GM hire inconsequential. That's not what I'm trying to get at. But what I'm saying is if you look at it in a different way, where the head coach is going to be the one making all the personnel calls and the GM is more of an executioner from that standpoint, but the orders are kind of coming from the top. It's different for the Jets. At a very minimum, it's different, right? I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm not saying he will be Sean Payton or Bill Parcells or any of these guys who have come in with that level of gravitas. I'm not even saying that Aaron Glenn has earned it. What I am saying is it's a different approach for the Jets. And I think that kind of at the core of what everything Jets fans have been asking for is, hey, try something new, right? And so I'm not going to fall into the trap of, oh, this is just another defensive coordinator and we're getting some shitty GM. Like, I do think this is different. I think it's a different approach, and I am I'm feeling good about that different approach if that is what's happening here, right? We'll see what happens with the GM news. We'll see where it eventually goes from here. But I think trying to read the tea leaves and pick up the breadcrumbs here, I would think that that's the structure that we're looking at. So I feel good about it.
Couple of notes here. We're recording. This was announced like 14 seconds ago. Albert Breer said a few names to watch to be in the mix for Jets offensive coordinator. Again, Nick Caley has been a common name. Josh McCown, dude, I don't know if Josh is going to be a good OC or not. I really don't. I think we all are really we love the person, we love the background, we love the potential intangibles of him and a Mark Brunell. I think they're very similar in a lot of ways. I will tell you, if they find a way to get Aaron Glenn and Josh McCown, are probably two of the 10 most well-liked Jets somehow of the last like 25 years. This fan base is going to have, there is going to be true excitement, for a team that doesn't have a quarterback right now, who I think will retire, and, a roster that is much better than shown on the field last year, but certainly needs work. Good way to kind of re-energize the fan base is say, hey, you actually might have a coaching staff that is rootable and might know what the fuck they're doing. Huge. Again, obviously, there's other names like Clint Kubiak would get me excited. Even a Brunell would get me excited. Can Glenn bring over a Hank Fraley? There's some talk of Mike Westhoff coming out of retirement to help. Chris Banjo will probably be the special teams coordinator. There's some talk Aaron Whitecott and Tony Oden might stay on, who are probably their two best coaches on the staff for the last 4 years. There's some serious, like, the reason you were excited about Glenn, again, the background, the player he was, the communication skills. Bill Parcells put out a quote essentially saying, like, hey man, he's not afraid to get feisty and get after you and like tell you what you need to hear. You know, I just, all those things are great. I think him being able to build a staff, especially offensively, whether it's a Gary Kubiak, a Todd Haley, some of these names, yeah, they're not exciting. You don't want them to be your coordinator in 2025. Absolutely not. But having Paul, like, these are guys that have been head coaches. Guys have been coordinators for a long time. Steve Wilkes, the same way. Even a Mike Westhoff. You need guys around you as a first-time coach that can help shape how you game plan, how you handle the media, how you handle players, how do you handle certain situations, clock management, fourth down conversions. And Glenn is extremely analytical. Talked to some people he's worked with over the last 3 or 4 years, and everyone kind of shared the same sentiment that they have never seen a coach. And these are guys, everyone kind of says this type of stuff. I've never seen this. I've never seen that. I've never seen a coach this involved in analytics and wanting to learn more, wanting weekly reports, custom reports, being able to get as much information as possible. He knew he wanted to be a head coach, and I think that's important. Some guys, and I'm not trying to trash Ben Johnson here, but I am going to take a shot at Ben Johnson, who weirdly took a shot at Matt LaFleur today. That really went well for Ryan Poles, buddy. Good job. Glenn had every intention of what he's done is to become a head coach, right? Since he got back into coaching. I don't know that that's the case for a lot of guys. The Adam Gases, Ben Johnsons, the other names, obviously, on defense, Robert Saleh. I don't know that his job was always to be a head coach. It was like, I'm going to be an awesome coordinator and hopefully I get the shot. Feels like Glenn was the opposite. It's like, my defense got better every year. I'm probably not a top 5 DC in the league. Maybe I'm not even a top 10 DC. Maybe I'm just a good defensive coordinator, but I'm going to be a really awesome head coach. And again, we don't know, but that to me screams like, I understand that building a staff, processing information. He said he wants to be aggressive. Again, he's got to do it on the field. They got to win football games. But I don't feel like I'm going to worry about a race to 20 with a guy who coached under these different guys that, the Lions will put up 50 on you and go for it on fourth down, up 50-0. Like, that's what he was just around. So I assume that's going to be kind of a lot of the same things we see with him as a head coach.
Yeah, I think a couple things that you hit on there. Number one, like on the analytics piece, it's not even that analytics is the end all be all or the answer or anything like that. I think it's definitely an important piece, but like, it's the desire and the willingness to learn new things, absorb new information, and change that I think is exciting about that. His interest in analytics is indicative of a person who is wanting to grow and wanting to be different and wanting to kind of be on the front edge of changes in the NFL rather than chasing it from behind, right? And that's an exciting guy to have leading your organization. As far as some of the other stuff you said, there's that interview from 3 or 4 years ago floating around with Aaron Glenn, where he's talking about his first job in the NFL and how he owned like 17 restaurants down in Houston. And basically he had a conversation with his wife and she encouraged him to get back into football. And when he got his first job, he basically said, like, I don't want you to treat me like an NFL veteran who's getting a free ride here. Like, I want to do every piece of this thing. I want to be a scout. I want to be a regional scout. I want to be QC. I want to be an assistant position coach. I want to do all of it. And that really lends itself to your point of like, none of these things were his end goal. He didn't want to be a defensive coordinator. All of this was a training ground for his goal of being a head coach one day. And when you look at it through that lens, it's something that's just really exciting to you. And, you know, the other thing, you mentioned the Bill Parcells quote that's starting to float around right now. There's another one, you know, from No Free Press, a reporter who works for ESPN, who is basically saying that they've never spoken to anybody in the NFL who wouldn't run through a brick wall for Aaron Glenn, which is another like really exciting thing to hear, especially when you contrast it with what we've been dealing with the last few years of players kind of calling out coaching without fully saying it in the media for the last couple of years. And some of the things we heard about the laziness and the mopiness of the previous coaching staff. So to hear you're getting a thinker with the analytics, a motivator, a guy who successfully played, a guy who's seen every piece of every organization he's worked for, like you put all those things together, like what more could you possibly ask for when we're talking about a CEO hire? And also, this isn't another just defensive coordinator hire. So like, let's move on from that conversation. I'm ready to be done with that one.
Yeah, 100%. Let's touch quickly on two other things, and before we wrap here, and I know Joe and Connor will be on the feed in about an hour. I'm probably going to try to get a pod in with one of the McCourtys here tonight to talk about scheme and kind of what they foresee with the Steve Wilkes and Aaron Glenn. I don't want to I want to space this out because we're going to have like 800 things. Likely, again, a press are going to be Friday. This gives the Jets the ability to have Aaron Glenn, who's going to be largely, again, in charge of scouting and stuff like that, probably down in Mobile next week and actually see some of these guys and, you know, kind of get a head start there. Last two things here. GM. It was kind of billed that Lance Newmark and Aaron Glenn Ben Johnson were going to be a partnership. I apologize. They were going to go to Vegas. Glenn was going to be kind of figuring out the pairing there, what was going to make sense. Who's he? You know, it was a lot of, who's he? You know, who's he going to be connected to? You know, it's Grigson and Flores, and it's, you know, Hallaby and McCown, and we're kind of doing this, you know, this game. They interviewed together yesterday. The Jets had only made one request. You heard some rumblings this morning of, hey, they're going to probably start interviewing second round. Glenn's done, and like he's going to be the guy, but GM not sure. Newmark's a fine candidate, and Connor did 6 hours on this, so I don't want to like belabor the point. He's a fine candidate. I think I ranked him sixth of the guys that the Jets interviewed. It was like if they hired him, I'd be like fine, but it's just kind of the scouting background guys, he was like fourth or fifth. And, you know, he was an analytic guy, but like kind of more recent, the whole thing. It seems as though reading the tea leaves, he was fine. But like maybe isn't the guy. And at least we want to talk to a couple of their guys because he didn't blow us out of the water. I talked about this last night. The Jets, it seems as though, did this entire process of interviewing guys. Glenn was always their guy. He always wanted the Jets. Like I said, the Jets got to be able to use somebody as leverage. We never see that. Great. But it feels like now the Jets actually can, no one wowed them past what Aaron Glenn was going to do. Now it's like, can some other GM come in? John Eric Sullivan, Alec Hallaby, is it Mike Greenberg? Now do you revisit a cap guy to partner with the way they had with Mangini? Do they revisit a cap guy, with Glenn? So that way he could kind of be the numbers guy. Glenn does the scouting piece. That could be a thing, and that would make Greenberg a lot more tenable. And I think for all of us here with Badlands. So we'll see what happens there. We have not gotten any of the requests for the second round interviews, but I expect that to kind of happen. I'm sure they'll interview those guys over the next 48 to 72 hours and try to get this thing locked up. But yeah, what are your last kind of thoughts there? And we'll kind of end with we'll end with just final thoughts on Glenn here again minutes after it happened.
Yeah, I would say that this it's a weird thing to say with everything that we've said at this point about Saleh and Douglas, but this is the third straight hiring cycle that the Jets have gotten their guy.
Yeah.
You could say that Vrabel was the guy before the guy, but I think we all knew where that was going.
Vrabel, no doubt.
Exactly. I think we all knew where that was going. And so when you talk about guys that you actually had a shot at, right? And guys that you identified as your top guy and that the fan base identified as the top guy, it's 3 straight now that they've gotten it. And so as much as we drag and dunk on a lot of the Jets lifers that have been there, kind of credit to them for getting the guy that I think a lot of people wanted. I think people would have been excited about Josh McCown also. And if the possibility exists that he's also here, then it becomes even more of a home run. I want to temper all of that with like the guy hasn't coached a game as a head coach yet. And so there's a lot to be seen. And we won't know if this is good until, a year, 2, 3 years down the road. Right. But I think, where we sit right now, it's a fun spot to be. It feels so much better than the dread we would have all felt if it was an Arthur Smith, right? Like I still tell people, like, I remember to this day where I was when they hired Adam Gase, because like it felt like the world was melting around me when I heard it on the radio. And so it's just nice to get a win in the offseason as a fan base and have something that you can feel good about. And it's going to be an enjoyable couple days.
Yeah, it's going to be an enjoyable couple of days. Again, Joe and Connor will be on here in 45 minutes. We'll run this quick and get this out and up on YouTube and the whole 9 yards. Again, I'm going to do a podcast later tonight. I'm sure Paul and Jake are going to have stuff throughout the week. I'll have TOJ talks later this weekend. Dan and Meeks will be on. Like, we'll have a bunch. Zach's going to react, I'm sure, on flight plans. So make sure to tune in for that. Today's a good day if you're a Jets fan. Again, will it mean shit in 5 years? I don't know. It might not. But at some point, Aaron Glenn's been a part of this as a Jet. At some point, the tide's going to have to turn. And he was a part of it once as a player. He was around here when they had success as a scout. He was around it in Detroit. He was around it in New Orleans. He's been around nothing but success and rebuilds throughout his career. The Jets need it. He needs the Jets in a sense of like, this is, you want to be immortalized and you want your, quote unquote, your number up on the wall. He's got every chance. The bar's the fucking floor, man. The bar is do not get blown out by the Patriots, Bills, and Dolphins and play a game that means something in December in the upcoming year. And you're going to basically have a statue. Paul, sign us off here. And again, we'll get Joe and Connor on the feed up here in about 45 minutes.
Let's fucking go.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying, man. Look, the bar's the floor, dude. Like, and give him time. At least early on. Like, let's give it a week or two.
Still a lot of questions to be answered, including who's playing quarterback. So let's be patient with it. But for now, we can be happy.
Hank Fraley not expected to join the Bears staff. He is a name to watch. The Lions offensive line coach. We'll see. Appreciate it for listening. We'll talk to you guys soon.